For everyone who has joined, thank you for joining us. You're welcome to the Diversity Summit. My name is Damola Moyemikeji. I'm a Nigerian gender man. I use the he and him pronoun. Um, this is a session on disability. More importantly, I think it's a session on blind spots, identifying blind spot about how people see disability and talking about that need for that huge change in the way we all need to think about what we think about when we hear disability. And so this panel is not going to solve all the problems. What we're going to do is we're trying to raise awareness on the rights of people with disabilities and how we need to be more empathetic towards the need of others. Now, by joining us today, you are demonstrating that this conversation is very, very important. Our panelists today will share from their personal experience with disability inclusion. They'll give us a sense on how we can apply their wisdom, which we've got a ton of in our various personal lives. I think one thing I would need to add, before we proceed, I can still see Toby. I think we just lost the Lola on that call. But I think one thing that is important to add is that we acknowledge that as much as we're going to be talking about a huge spectrum of disability, this panel does not have all disability experiences. All disability experiences are not currently represented, but we hope that this will be one of the many conversations that will shed light into the many blind spots that we have as a collective when we talk about disabilities. So I'm going to allow our panelists introduce themselves. I'm going to start with Tobiloba. I can see that two other panelists are experiencing technology challenge, but it's normal. We're just going to act as if that's normal. Normal is a loaded word. That's not normal. But I'm going to hand this over to Toby. So Toby, I want you to just introduce yourself. And Toby feels like I'm putting her on the spot.
No, I think you know that's what you're doing right now. But that's okay. I mean, that's fine. My name is Tobiloba Ajayi, and I like to say that I'm a disability management advocate. I run an organization that promotes inclusive mainstream education for children with cerebral palsy in Nigeria. Cerebral palsy, for a lot of people who haven't heard of it, is a disorder of movement and posture that is caused by damage to developing brain, somewhere within pregnancy, delivery, or within the first 3 years of life. Now, again, like the conversation we're about to have, a lot of people have a lot of blind spots and a lot of assumptions around, especially those kind of disabilities, disabilities that are very obvious, that are in your face, like you can't miss it, right? So there are a lot of blind spots around that. And one of the big ones is around, how do I say this? Intellectual competence, right? So people assume that because you're physically impaired, you're supposed to be dumb. Well, I kind of made it my life mission to show the world that physical disability does not always equal intellectual impairment. So that's me in brief.
Thank you. That's one thing I think I know that Adelola is trying to join back in, but we're just going to continue while my colleagues at the technical team help our panelists get this sorted.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I think we obviously often need to talk about is the language we use when we talk about disability.
Okay.
So for instance, I know that I've had conversation with people and there's always this conversation about what comes first, regarding language. Are we having a person first language or an
disability
first language? Yeah, so for those that are joining us, it means that are we talking about people, are we addressing people as persons living with disability, or we're saying this person is a disabled person? So for instance, if one is blind, are we saying, person living with blindness? Are we saying this person is person. So what's the preference, Tobiloba, and
So
how do we navigate that terrain?
there's no the preference is whatever the person wants.
Mm.
So you see, that's the thing. And this week I experienced this again. You see, people like to put everybody with a disability in one single box and then label it and say we've got you guys boxed in. But that's not true. In the visually impaired community, let me use people first. I didn't people first language, right? Um, they say blind, and they're okay to say blind, and they don't mind. Okay. Same thing with the deaf community. They're okay to say deaf. People living with autism want, actually, a lot of them prefer to be called autistic. A lot of the times when you see this conversation around people first versus identity first, it's not really, a lot of the times, it's not people with disabilities that are championing that conversation. And I will tell you this because I live with a disability. And I will tell you that the last thing I was worried about at any point in my life was what somebody called me, whether the
Mm.
person was identity first or disability first. It really didn't matter unless you were actually using demeaning words. Now there are demeaning words that we use, especially in this part of the world. So there are words that you should just expunge, right, from your vocabulary if you have them. Words like retarded, words like
Right.
words like so words like retarded, words like um dumb, words like
Mm.
um ineducable.
Mm.
Things like
Right.
that.
Right.
So words like that, and then of course we have the ones we have in our local dialects that are even worse because when English tends to soften things. When we say certain things in Yoruba,
Mhm.
it kind of gets worse. So there are certain words, of course, those kind of inherently demeaning words that are basically said to demean that we can throw out of the window. But you see this argument about person first, identity first, it's actually what the person with disability wants to be called. So you basically just, I mean,
Mm.
so if you ask me, what do you prefer, person first, identity first? I'll just say, Toby is my name, call me Toby. I really don't care. I mean, I have a name, use it. Like, all these labels, I really don't
Yes.
care for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I quite agree. I think that it's necessary for us to maybe the premise would have started with is to note that we all have blind spots, right? As humans, we've evolved to have blind spots. Even the good people among us, even well-intentioned people, fall for these blind spots, and it's more about the human mind. So, for instance, one of the things that I've come to understand is that we'll keep in mind that we have like a long evolutionary path that has shaped our social nature to what we currently have today. So, in the past, we recognize that there's a social world. We recognize that
Mhm.
our values and aspirations have changed radically and rapidly, even just
Mhm.
within the last few generations. Equal rights, fairness, fair treatment, values that are essential to this modern system that we currently
Mm.
have has actually existed only for just a few centuries. We do not have all of this, and the demands that have been placed on us to survive in the past are not the same
Right.
demands that allow us to thrive right now. So there's that consciousness that we really need to bring ourselves into, and that's why we need to have some of these conversations on how we can talk about these things, especially because we live in a
Okay.
society where a lot of people are trying to be politically correct, right? So we're trying to say, I don't want to hurt this person's feeling, but at the same time, I don't know how to interact with this person. So this conversation is more going to be like an eye opener to see how can we create this safe space where we can allow people to talk about disability, interact, ask questions, and share from our own perspectives too, to say, yes, indeed, I live with a disability, but in spite of or because of this, it has helped me become a better human. and help me relate with others as better humans. So that leads me to one question I would have loved to share with other panelists, which is, and to the audience too. So when you see disabled person, when you see a person,
pick one. Just pick your poison. Person first, whatever. Okay. Delilah is back, but I think Damola is frozen.
Yes, I think so too.
Yes, I'm waiting for you.
Oh, I've been missing you. I've been missing your gist.
Oh, don't mind me. Was the first part of the conversation was that conversation around identity first or person first language? I just told them that whatever the person prefers, literally. And as a person with disability, I honestly don't even care. So you see that debate around identity first or person first language is usually a debate championed by people who don't necessarily live with disabilities. Most people with disabilities, really? Nah.
I think that it's different for different people, honestly.
Yeah.
It depends on the environment.
Yes, so that's what I said. Ask the person, what do you prefer? So
what do you prefer exactly?
This idea of trying to box people into a box, I really don't think it works. What do you prefer? If you ask me that question, I'll just tell you Toby is my name. Use it. Like, I have a name. I don't need. My name is Toby. Use the name. Like, what is the problem?
Exactly.
So I think there's that point of a bit of an awareness. So, for instance, regardless of where you are, we all have various identities, right? And for you, Toby, for example, you know what? Identify with me with my name first, rather than any other thing. So would you want to share? I know with the work you've done. With what you've done, would you want to share what has your experience been in navigating
what, please? Sorry, it's a bit low here.
Oh, okay. With the work you've done in the past, would you want to enlighten us about how it is to navigate that terrain? So, for instance, Toby had given us an example to say, for me, I don't care if it is identity first or persons first. Just call me and let's have that conversation that way. With people you've worked with.
All right, yeah. So let me, to be honest, I think I learned firsthand to relate with people based on what they want. Because when I started off my career, so of course, the bulk of my work is with children with autism, right? And so I work with families, and so they would say, no, don't say my child is autistic, my child has autism, my child is living with autism. And then a few years down the line, I write that on Twitter, and I get attacked by persons who actually do live with this autism, and they told me we don't live with autism, we are autistic. And I'm like, okay. So now I educate people, even parents, that see, let your child. I understand why you want the child first, right? But let your child decide. Of course, for a little child, it's the parents that decide for that child. But as they grow older, definitely they decide whether they want to be referred to as autistic or a person living with autism. But of course, autism is a bit easier because you can just say they are on the autism spectrum. So everybody, whether identity first or disability first, agree that this person is on the spectrum. So for different disabilities, different experiences. But like Toby said, see, it's not even about, I think it's this whole identity first and disability first issue is taking attention off the child, of that person.
Thank you.
Let it, this conversation is about diversity, blind spot, and they being seen. This is how we even show that we see them, by but let's just interact with them. So yes, I understand that you have a disability or you have a need or something, but I'm not going to let that shroud my experience with you or my interaction with you. So I'm not arguing myself in my head. What should I say? What is right? What is wrong? Because these things are funny. I think I told Toby some time ago about how I struggled with hearing impairment and deaf. because I was told that you don't say someone is deaf, you say the person is hearing impaired. Then I met people who are actually deaf, and they said, no, we are deaf. And I'm like, okay, what do I do here? And so that brings, for me as a typical person, it then brings a struggle in interaction. I don't know what to say to you. I don't know what is right, what is wrong. I'm afraid of being attacked. And that definitely brings some form of barrier to this issue of inclusion and social interactions. So but can we just be, first of all, normal and let the person lead the conversation? Beyond, I mean, I might extend a bit. It's the same way when I interact with a child, a person with autism, and that person might have they all have what they call sensory processing disorder. However, it's different. For some, they like touch. Some don't like touch. So why would I say, oh, I'm never going to touch you because you have autism, and they told me that they don't like touch. Meanwhile, a child might be seeking a hug or a touch. So what do? I just come to you normal and let you lead me to know you better. So I work with kids who will on their own come and hug me, and I know, oh, this child is the seeker. And I say a child who is staying away, who's avoiding touch, and I know, okay, so this child is not a seeker, this one is avoiding. So I think that it helps us in our inclusion and our diversity and conversation to understand that each person is an individual and should teach you how to relate with them. And of course, how do you learn? It's by first just interacting, just relating, not pushing yourself and struggling your head, what is right, what is wrong, I hope that helps.
Definitely, that definitely helps. I can see that Lucy is trying to also join in. I would wait as it does that. But when you were sharing something, you mentioned something about, and I think Toby also did that in our introduction, about the most common blind spot and bias that people have, about you seeing someone with disability and thinking, automatically assessing several other things that are not visible about the person. And what it's a common blind spot, and while that of that assessment towards people with disabilities is quite visible, I think it's something that is common for the human being. The way the human brain works, for instance, it's about just aligning labels and thoughts to one another. So, for instance,
yes.
that it's surprisingly very easy, and I didn't say accurate, very easy. How people would look at a picture, and from that picture, or people look at someone, and from that first instance, they try to judge who is more trustworthy. They try to judge competence. They try to judge ability. They try to judge a lot of things. And it's just a natural heuristic. The brain, that's the way the brain works. The problem, of course, is that it may not be just a little wrong, but of course, quite wrong. And so, the question is, how do we now know this as humans? We understand that this is the way our brain works, but how do we witness the social mind bug separately? How can we correct that? What do we need to do to be conscious about it and correct it?
Is that a question for me or for Toby?
No, I'm trying for both of you. Who would want to go first?
Okay, let me speak as someone who so Toby has lived with a disability all her life. So she's had to deal, and of course she had to educate people. But for me, I would say for myself, a lot of things are, we were not born. I don't think that children are born to judge. They might notice the difference. I remember many years ago, one of our neighbors had a child, and just had a baby who was born. I remember our limbs were not fully formed. And all of us entered the room, and we're like, of course, we're pitying them. But my little cousin, who was about 2 or 3 at this time, just entered the room, went to her, I was looking at, I was just curious. I was like, what? Where is her hand? All that child had was curiosity. Interestingly, his older brother just saw a baby. He was like, oh, baby. didn't see that difference, that disability. But the child, they didn't stay away from the baby because the baby's hands were not fully formed. You know, right? So I honestly, and my interaction with children, and understand I've worked in mainstream classroom space, and I've worked with the younger children. I worked in the nursery early years classroom. I also noticed the same thing where the children were very accepting of this child with autism. They knew she was different. They wanted to help her. They wanted to understand her, of course, except until she started to hit them and they're like, oh, why is she hitting me? You know, and we had to make them understand how to respond appropriately. But then I've also worked with older kids who now know, oh, this child is different. Let's bully this child. Let's do it. So here's what I think should be done. And that's why we do what we do. That's why I do what I do. And I feel that's what Toby does more than I do, definitely, is awareness. That's the essence of awareness and advocacy. Because we don't know what to do. I'll tell you a true story. I'm not sure if I've told Tobiloba before. Before I ever met Tobiloba in real life, I had read her blog many times. So when I saw her in real life and they said I was Tobiloba Ajayi, I could not reconcile it. I'm like, no, this is not her. And then I'm telling you, sometimes no, that can't be her, that can't be her. And then like, and of course, you know the interesting thing, I was taught what to do because a few people knew her already at that event. So they just went and they were hugging her and greeting her. So I just knew that the next thing to do was to go and hug her and greet her. So that's the thing. We teach, we model. People don't naturally know what to do. They have to be taught what to do. Even, I always say that even the best of persons, we were taught growing up that if you saw a person with disability, you give them money. I mean, if you're a good human being, you pity them, you give them money. But for crying out loud, there are people who use the wheelchair and are way richer than I am. Steve Hawkins solved more problems than I have ever solved. And he didn't need my money. Even if I saw him, and I personally know a number of people that do not need my money, and they are on the autism spectrum, they have cerebral palsy, they use the wheelchair, or they use prosthetics, whatever it is, they don't need our money. So when we meet such people, what do we now do? Do we give them money and say, well, you know, you have a disability, all I know how to do is to give you money? No. And so, first of all, we need to teach and model. And then what should we now teach and model? But we need to teach people to accept, presume competence. Don't think that the person lacks ability. So, they're struggling with learning in class, for example. It means he can't do any other thing. Or even as a teacher, you say, oh, this child didn't learn this topic last week. It means this new topic is even harder. I'm almost sure he can't do it. But what if he can? What if this topic is actually the easier one for the child? So it's that. So what we should model to them is first acceptance and then presuming competence. Do not assume for that person. Allow that person to lead you, to introduce themselves basically by their actions and by the things that they do. So yeah, that's how I know. I mean, that's how I know best to teach the right response.
Thank you very much. Toby, I think you would want to add one or two things. And before Toby, if we have questions, we can just go to the chat part of this on how, and you can just ask your question. So I'm just going to read it out to the panelists to answer. Toby.
Yeah, thanks so much, Adilola. Thank you for that. And yeah, that surprise you got, a lot of people get it. It's not the first time, trust me. Like I was saying to Damola at the beginning of the session, people presume incompetence the minute that they hear or see, or in our own case, see, because cerebral palsy is so in your face. Like you can't miss it. So people just presume that you're not supposed to be competent. And so how do you teach the right thing? Like Adela said, you model it. But again, I always say to people, because again, when I hear this confusion about, so how do I approach someone with a disability? I'm like, how do you approach somebody you're just meeting for the first time?
Exactly.
If you meet somebody for the first time, what do? Why does disability suddenly put a wall or a barrier between you and this person? then the issue is you've created a barrier in your mind, and then you have to now say to yourself, this barrier is about me and my thinking. So this for me is an issue, and I need to deal with it from my point of view, and then move forward. I'm sure that that's a meeting that you were talking about. I know somebody who had said to me on the group that, I think somebody had posted about me and said, she has cerebral palsy, and then somebody in the group had said she's too smart to have cerebral palsy, and I was like, there we go. And so when we did get to that meeting, and people started, saying, WHI, blah 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 blah, I saw the person's eyes literally go wide, like, is she the one? How is she the one? But again, it's about modeling the right behavior, right? It's about showing people what to do and how to do it. It's basically teaching people that see the person first. I think that that's the issue. Our society has taught us to see difference first. And you can learn a huge lesson from children about this, right? Children can teach you so much about acceptance and inclusion, because children just see another child. Even when they notice the difference is an aside. So they're like, why do you walk that way? And once you give them a satisfactory answer, they've moved on. Like they've moved on. They've basically figured out, okay, that's how you are. Okay, so yeah, but I still want to play with you. So how can we play with you? And so children can literally teach us how to see people first, see a person first. So if you realize that you're immediately thinking about the disability and not the person, then switch what you're thinking and say, this person is what, female just like me or male just like me. I want to have a conversation with this person. Go ahead and have a conversation with them. It was interesting. I remember that we all, like you said, we all have blind spots. I remember the first time I had to interact with a hearing impaired person, so a deaf person, was my first job. And my first job was a very inclusive workplace. So we had pretty much a lot of disabilities represented. And I had to interact with my hearing impaired colleagues. First I was stumped. I was like, how do I do this? Because I can't sign, right? I have CP, so I can't sign. What do I do? And then I realized, hey, it's a person. This person is not their disability. Their disability is just one part of their identity. I want to have a conversation with a person. So what other ways can I figure out how to break this communication barrier? And I remember then it was pen and paper. That time we didn't have WhatsApp. So yeah, it was pen and paper. And trust me, the conversations flew back and forth like no man's business. And we became really good friends. So it's always about saying, I see a person. How do I reach a person? But if you keep seeing just the disability, then you're going to get stuck. And that's when you start getting stuck in, is it identity first or disability first? And they start having those conversations that really hold no water.
Yeah.
Mixed things. But when you see a person, then the debate about is it identity first or disability first will not happen. So it's important that we see the person before the disability. And so many people are on this table, actually. Too many people see the disability before the person, even parents.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so that's my take on it.
Even persons with disability see others with disability first.
So I was about zooming into that. I wanted us to peel it up as an onion. We talk about the general community. Then we're now zooming into the community of people with disabilities. Now, when we talk about inclusion generally, how do people living with disabilities see others within that community? How do we ensure inclusion? Because regardless of the disability, we mentioned earlier that disability is just one part of people's identity. We have various other strata of our individual identities. We're female, depending on where we grew up, depending on our ethnic or religious backgrounds, depending on several other things that make us us. So how do we talk about inclusion within that community?
So that conversation is kind of hard to have in the community. And the reason it's hard to have is that what inclusion means is that everybody has what they need to be a part of the community, to be a part of the society in general, right? And depending on where you fall in the community, what you need is different.
Yes.
So you see how that can become an issue, because we're all needing different things.
Exactly.
So it can be quite tricky to have conversations around inclusion, unless you're, of course, for someone like me who's been working in the space long enough, I have the ability to step out and just look at everybody and say, who are we leaving out by how we're doing this? And that's always the easy way to think about it for me. So when I talk to sometimes business owners about building inclusive businesses, I say to them, I say, look, in the way that your business currently runs, who are you currently leaving out? That's the first way to begin to think inclusively. Can the person let's start, and the person on the wheelchair access your office building without being carried like a sack of potatoes? If they can, problem one. I mean, can the visually impaired person, understand the product description on your website? Can their screen readers read it? If they can't, you're leaving them out. Can a hearing impaired person, read captions? Do you have captions on your product pictures for them to read? Because they can't hear your video, and we all like to do motion pictures these days. Do we have captions for that? So it's to begin to think, I mean, are your colors so bright that somebody with a sensory processing disorder will automatically close the page because I cannot have any? So it's always to zoom out. It's really a big zoom lens. So zoom out and say, how are we leaving people behind? And then begin to, so you're not going, I always say that, look, inclusion is a journey. It's not really a destination. Because as people grow, my needs when I was 5 are not my needs today. So even depending on the age demographic of the people you're even serving, their needs are going to be different. As people grow, their needs are going to be different as well. So it's a journey. It's a journey of consistently saying, well, we're choosing to leave no one behind. And so we're going to think about all the ways that we might be excluding people and then take steps to correct it. And yes, you might oversight, you might miss something. If somebody points out to you, you're leaving me out in this way, then you go ahead and find ways to fix that. So even in the community, I mean, we always have to teach each other. I mean, so many disability groups. I mean, disability group for lawyers with disabilities. I mean, a disability group for women with disabilities. And in the group, we'll be busy telling each other, people would post pictures. So somebody who is sighted will post a picture, and I'm going to be like, describe the picture, but I can't see it. Or somebody posts a video, and I hear in bed, colleagues say, where's the closed captioning because I can't hear it? Or somebody posts an audio voice note and they're like, transcribe the audio voice notes because it ain't happening. So we all have those blind spots and those oversights, but it's the willingness to correct ourselves immediately. We're basically accused, or somebody points it out to us, say you're looking out in this way. It's our willingness to correct it instead of defend. Because the part that blows my mind is how we defend exclusion as a people. That blows my mind. So I'm not saying that you won't exclude either. You won't exclude just because you don't know. You will do that. That's human. But when people point it out to you to say, you're excluding me by the way this is being done, it's to say, I didn't realize, and then take steps to correct it, not defend exclusion as that's how we've always done it. Or maybe you should have your own separate events. So for me, that's it.
I agree with you, Tobiloba. And I think this is one thing that we shouldn't. It's something that we shouldn't just shy away from. It's right to note that it's been a very tricky conversation. Now, it's not really a conversation less important to have. Yeah, so that is tricky doesn't make the conversation very less important to have, because it's very easy for us to think, and that's the way the human brain works. Especially for those who are well intentioned. So you'll be in a management meeting. I'm going to talk from the business perspective. So you're in a management meeting and a decision is going to be made, and you're going to think, oh, okay, in the past, when we made this decision, so person was with us, and so person had this level of disability, and so person was able to access our product because of this. And based on that, you proceed with that decision with the spec or with something that has worked for one person, forgetting that even though this person may be an autistic person, right? There's several other people that are living with autism or that are autistic, but have various different experiences of autism. Yeah, and this is something that we literally need to talk about, you know. So how do we, one, have this conversation over and again? Because diversity and difference is something that has come for us to make very obvious, for us to celebrate and not just tolerate. And this, it has to penetrate every decision we make, either business decisions we're trying to make, policy decisions we're trying to make. These things are quite important for us to hold and have a full grasp on. So how do we incentivize proper behavior? And proper behavior means identifying that people are different, ensuring inclusion, real inclusion within and outside of this space, you know, and being conscious of that when we're making decisions that would impact the lives of both people who living with disabilities and those that are not.
So I like this question because it's a question that I've always liked to answer. I know people with disabilities don't like me when I say this, so I'm about to offend my community a little, but it's okay. I mean, it's not new. You see, the thing is this: nobody really is 100% altruistic. When we do things, there has to be something in it for us. And so when we say the society needs to be more inclusive, or we need to celebrate diversity more, we need to celebrate difference more, we need to show people what's in it for them. So when I speak about inclusion, and I don't asking me to do this all the time. When I'm training schools and I'm telling schools I need you to be more inclusive, I'm showing them the money, literally. Like, this is how much money you are leaving on the table by refusing to run an inclusive school. So if we do the math of what it's going to cost you versus what you start to gain, there's something in it for you. Because the truth is that no one is 100% altruistic. People have to see what's in it for them. And until we show people that there is value in celebrating difference and diversity, until we show people how it impacts their bottom line, especially businesses, even government, there has to be something in it for government. For government to then wake up and say, we want to do this. Even if it's just optics, there has to be something in it. So for me, how do we incentivize good behavior? It's to show people what's in it. It's to show people it's to show businesses how being inclusive in your business affects your bottom line. I remember making a joke in 2000, I think it was 2018, and it wasn't a joke. I said, look, that if you look at the banks in Nigeria, that First Bank probably has the highest number of persons with disabilities as their customers. Because First Bank is practically the only bank, and you may have not noticed this because it doesn't affect you, but First Bank is the only bank that has a security door that's big enough for a wheelchair. Think about First Bank security doors. They're wide. They're not the usual narrow ones you see in all the other banks. They're wide enough for a wheelchair. That was a smart business decision because they knew that in creating value for their customers with disabilities, they were creating value for themselves. And so they've continued to keep those customers. Even when everybody says, oh, Sado Generation Bank, people with disabilities will look at you and be like, we hear you, but we are still taking our money there. Because I can enter the bank with my wheelchair and with my crutches. So that's the so you need to show people where the money is. If you're going to, people are going to run businesses inclusively. If we're going to incentivize, good behavior, people have to see what's in it for them. How does it affect their bottom line? It cannot just be about CSR because CSR is, this is what I feel like doing. It has to become shared value. People need to be exactly CSR. So it has to move from CSR to shared value. We need to move it to shared value to the point where, because I see what I stand to gain here, and then I'm willing to give you what you need. My first practical example of shared value was a project I worked on during grad school. It was a food bank project where basically the food bank collected food items from people, members of the public, and distributed it to people who could not afford food for free. And we would normally, want to do a food drive and would have to write to a big supermarket chain and try to get them to allow us to come do a food drive in their store. And then one of the big supermarket chains got our letter and then saw the value. So they basically thought to themselves, look, if these people come into our store, because the people that are going to donate food items to them have to buy the food items, right? Most likely they will buy it from us to donate to them, which means that if each person spends an extra £1 because they want to donate to these guys, that's an extra £1 in our pocket, and items flying off our shelves. They took over the entire project, branded it, became now they now have the brand for it. It became their project. So they now run a food bank collection twice a year, and they put so much advertising dollars behind that project. Guess what? It worked for everybody. What? Win. Now the food banks don't have to scout for food anymore because Tesco collects the food for you. You just go, you pick up your food, you move. But that's because they now moved it from feeling like we're doing these guys a favor to seeing how it benefited their bottom line. And so we always have to think shared value. That's the only way we're going to get good behavior to become something that people feel like they should do. As long as people feel like these people, they're always too much, they're always asking for something, you will always get tokenism. And I'll give you a classic example in Lagos. The biggest example of tokenism in Lagos is the ramps on your overhead bridges. So Lagos State would say they've ticked the box on, architectural access to the bridge. Have you tried using those ramps? The gradient is so steep, even you without a disability will have a problem. So the average person with a disability will take their chances with the steps. But you see, because the attitude is, these people want this thing, let's just give them something. They haven't seen the value that's in it for them. So they've done what, as long as we tick the box, it doesn't matter whether it works or not. But when we move from tokenism and CSR to shared value, you're going to make sure it works for me, because it is when it works for me that I will patronize you. So both of us will end up. So we have to move. That's how we are going to incentivize the behavior. We are going to have to show the value, either in monetary terms or in something that works for the person, because each person has their price. It may not be money, but we all have something that drives us. And in finding what drives the person that you're trying to serve, it's to now show them how they can get that thing that drives them from doing this thing right. You're muted.
Okay, so thank you very much. So before we move to Adela, if you're just joining us, you're welcome to the Diversity Summit 2020, the Future Awards Africa. And this session is about blind spots. We really see people with disability. And I've been talking with Tobiloba Ajayi, Adelola Adema. So Adelola,
okay,
how do we, Toby has shared how we can, a perception about how we can really incentivize proper behavior, especially as regards inclusion and diversity. What would you want to add?
All right. So sadly, I missed a lot of Toby's session because I kept going back and forth. So how do we sensitize the right behavior?
Yeah.
Okay, I heard about value. I know that definitely is true. People when they don't see what's in it for them. I work in the school system, and one of the things that helped schools become aware of the need for inclusion is discovering, I'll say two things. One, just stumbling on, aside from invisible disabilities, is that what they call them? Like autism, dyslexia. So they practically just stumble on it and they're like, should we tell parents to take their children away, which was what was happening. But then they realized that if one child left, if the child left, the siblings would leave as well. So definitely they began to ask themselves, what do we do to ensure that And I think Toby also has a similar story to that because she went to the same school with her sibling, even though her case was not, I mean, she doesn't have an invisible disability. It's very visible. So I know that value definitely helps. Another thing is, there's this thing they say that until it happens, until you know someone, it's statistics. So SARS has been killing people. Yeah, until somebody says my child was killed, my brother, like, so it affected or somebody that you actually know was killed, like it was SARS, then it becomes your own. So sometimes making people see that how people, how do I put this? Making it real. One of the issues we had in Nigeria with acceptance and stigmatization was people hiding their children. So people who we would have listened to had hidden their children. And so the ones we were seeing were the beggars. Allow me to say it like that, put it like that. So that's another thing. So sometimes it's being able to relate with I permit this analogy or anecdote I want to share, where when I was in university, somebody had a program on HIV, and she brought in my university, and by the way, I went to OAU, so you can imagine the kind of persons that are in that environment. And then she brings non-educated persons with HIV to speak to us about their experiences. So they're like, I mean, one woman was speaking Yoruba, the other one was speaking Pidgin, telling us about how they got HIV and all of that. I couldn't relate with it. As much as I knew that HIV was not status, what's the word, bias, status bias, and I had seen, I told my friend, I said, are there no educated persons with HIV? Why would she bring people like this? So sometimes is that being able to relate. So people speaking up definitely begins to make you, I mean, you now see somebody you know, or someone you respect, saying, oh, I have a child with cerebral palsy, or I have, like I said, I read Toby's blog before I saw her. Then seeing her, I'm like, oh, this brilliant brain is this person. So sometimes it's in that coming out. Yeah, people are afraid of coming out. People are like, oh, what if I bring my child out and my child is stigmatized and all of those things? Or I myself, as a parent, am stigmatized or looked down on. The thing is, you're not fighting for that child's present, you're fighting for the child's lifetime. And you're not only fighting for your child, you're fighting for other persons. Because that's when we now begin to say, okay, I mean, like I had to talk about the ramps. Would then have been testing? Would then have found persons with this disability and say, okay, can you tell us if this looks like it? So it's those things of humanizing experiences. I mean, that has helped me as an individual. It has helped in my work. I mean, I work in school system and I see teachers changing over time. With every child with special needs that comes into their class, the next year, they are better at it because this becomes more real to them. Like, oh, so this is not, it's not just one child that has this, as dyslexia, for example, has autism, this entire school. Oh, there are other children. So their minds are open to learning more and learning more and learning more. So that's just me adding to the case of value that took mentioned. I think, is it my network? Damola, you're muted.
What is established is that disability is quite ubiquitous. It does not discriminate on the basis of ethnic, sexual, or religious status. We've also talked about the need for us to understand these blind spots that we all have. And listen, it's normal. There's nothing wrong with you as a human being to have these blind spots, you know. But we all have the responsibility of identifying them when we have them or when we spot them and trying to really work on them. I've seen, like I mentioned earlier, I've seen a lot of well-intentioned people who would really fall for this. But I feel that understanding these blind spots could actually give us a pause, you know, enough pause to rethink the manner that we make important decisions about others, agree that those decisions either affect us or those decisions affect them. That's one principal thing that we've been able to bring out. So I'm just going to ask one final question.
Okay.
Beyond the series of advice that both of you had actually given out, what's the most important thing that those who want to become allies, or those who say, you know what, I'm standing in the gap for, I do not live with a disability, but I'm standing in the gap for people that live with disabilities that are around me. What's the most important thing they need to note, or we all need to note?
Again, I'm very simple on this. Just see the person. So avoid generalization. So I see this a lot, and I see this a lot, especially with allies, right? So it's this thing where all children with autism are put in one like box.
Yeah.
All of them, all children with. I mean, for a very long time, before I even started reading up on autism, I started following, I didn't learn all of that. If you had asked me, oh, about autism, first of all, I would just say that all of them are math geniuses or something silly like that.
Yeah.
Because somebody as in the bid to be an ally and in the bid to advocate has then painted an entire community with one brush. So yeah, for me, that's the most important thing that allies need to know. When you meet one person with a disability, you've met one person. And that one experience does not speak for the experience of all. So it's important that you see the person in front of you. Like I always say to teachers, teach the child in front of you, not the child in your textbook.
That's a nice one.
That's right.
I think I'll start saying that.
I don't get them guys. Don't let them steal you.
I wish I was still on Twitter. I tweeted it now.
Thank you. That's a global. Adela, you would want to add one more thing?
Yeah, what I would say to people is what I've said to many people who I have met who say to me, how do I want to advocate for children with autism, for example. I would say you need to know autism. And I don't mean know it in terms of own it, but experience it. Give yourself an opportunity to learn about it. So don't just read up. The benefit of living in Nigeria is, being in this space, there are many centers that start that in. If you're outside Lagos, for example, or you're outside in a state where there are no centers, take a week off, send them an email that you want to visit, and they would allow you to. At least most centers I'm aware of would allow you to interact with their children, because this is. I'll tell a true story. So I met a lady who had read up on autism or something at some point and was very passionate about autism. And I started writing about it, and started speaking at events. So, but I listened to her, and I knew that she had only read it. So I sent her, okay, of course, we met. Interesting. So we met because she sent me a message and said, I want you to mentor me. So I'm like, oh yeah. So I'm listening to her, and I said, have you ever seen a child with autism before? And she says, I've watched videos. I said, no, that's not what I mean. I said, you live in Lagos. You live in Lagos. I said, go and intern for a month. And it's not only autism, even the reason I can talk about quite a number of disability or special needs is because I've had an opportunity to work with such children. Sometimes a short time, sometimes a term. It doesn't make me a guru, but what that means is that I'm informed. So seek opportunities to know about. So you want to be an ally. Seek opportunities to listen to these people. Seek opportunities to listen to parents, interact with the persons. The persons with these disabilities are very important because parents will speak from their own point of view. But a child, you come into a room, you see that child, you kind of understand that child. So we would read that all children with autism don't make eye contact, don't do this. But you get to a place, you see a child, they say the child's on the spectrum, the child is looking at you like this. And I'm like, okay, so that ticks for you, that makes you, so that when you are speaking from an informed position, and you are making decisions, because we're not only talking about advocates now or people that are carrying banners. Sometimes as a decision maker, by interacting with these persons, it helps you in making the right decisions. I heard you say earlier about people saying, oh, this other guy that was here was able to access. So that's one person. By the time you interact with 2, 3 people, definitely you are thinking different. You might not meet all the, and then another thing I would say is that don't beat yourself up too much when you make mistakes. It's normal. So you've met 3 people with a condition, and based on what you've seen, you've created a solution. And then if that solution is not usable by another person with that same condition, you don't beat yourself up. It's okay. What's the next thing to add? Because even as a teacher and as a special needs teacher, I still make mistakes. I was just talking with a colleague just now about one child in my school who's extremely brilliant. And sometimes the solutions we want to give him are based on the textbook. What the textbook says, these are the solutions for this kind of person. But that's not his problem. So initially we struggled. We struggled with in fact, to be honest, sometimes I'm like, why am I going to work with this child? Why are you putting this child on my list? But now I know that it's on my list because he has another need. He has a need that has to be met as well. So yes, interact with them. Be open to learning, open to listening. Listen. I don't think I can say listening enough. I'll try to talk for an hour.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you very much. Thank you so much, Adelola. Thank you, Tobiloba. And thank you to everyone that has joined us for this conversation on blind spots. Do we really see people with disabilities at the Diversity Summit 2020? It's been a fantastic conversation. I like it when we have difficult conversations, and at the end of it all, we call it fantastic. So it's been a fantastic conversation. It's not, like I mentioned when we started this, it's not going to be the end of this conversation. This is a conversation starter. Have these conversations in your homes, have them at work, have them when you're making decisions, corporate decisions, business decisions, policy decisions,
family decisions sometimes.
Yeah, family decisions.
Family decisions. Please, echo it. Increase the volume for people.
Family decisions. Have these conversations. We should know that one of the best ways we can really become good allies, the same way we can become good allies to other people, which is listen, see people as people, have that bond, as Toby had said. Just talk with them, know that they are persons first before the identities that they've embraced. So thank you very much for everyone that has joined us. I would also want to thank Mr. Oluwatomisin Kolawole. I can see Tony had been on the call and was trying to join in. But thank you for everyone that has joined in. We really appreciate it. If you have questions or any other thing, you can be free to reach out to any of our panelists, either Tobiloba Ajayi or Adeola Edema online. It's been a wonderful time. Have a wonderful day.
Oh, there's a question here.
Yeah.
So, Damola, there's a question here.
Okay.
Question in the session.
Do we? So I can see that we're 3 minutes behind schedule, but let's see if we...
Okay, so we have to go.
Yeah, so let's see if we can take it in a minute, then just end this.
Okay.
So when you watch foreign movies, you see instances where a person with special needs mentions their disability once he or she is in a public space. I guess it helps people to understand them. Should we consider training people with disability to help others? That's people who are unaware, to understand them.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is. It's self-advocacy. That's what we call self-advocacy, where you kind of say, oh, I think I understand what you're trying to say. So let me use autism, for example. Somebody comes and says, oh, I have autism and this light might be too much for me. So that's it. So yes, you teach people with disabilities to advocate for themselves first before they even advocate for their own community.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Somebody doesn't need to agree with me.
Yeah. I mentioned earlier that each person is different, and as a person living with disability or as a disabled person, whichever you want to choose, that you speak what you want. Each person inclusion so much matters, and that difference has to be embraced. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining. It's been a wonderful time. I'm Damola Morenikeji, and I've been joined with Tobiloba Ajayi and Adelo Laidema. Have a fantastic day.
Thank you.
Thank you.